Hey everyone, and welcome to the latest installment of MSP Business School. As always, I'm your host, Brian Doyle, and I am excited today. I've got a fellow person in the media, if you will, and I should not probably put myself into the media in the same class as him, but we're out there trying to educate the world and bring information forward. So I'd like to welcome Eric Anthony from All Things MSP to the show today.
Thank you, Brian. I just love being here. And by the way, we're all doing this. I don't think there's different levels, right? I think we're all just trying to contribute our own little piece to this community and doing the best we can.
Yeah, I think this industry is filled with servants, right? That's what we do by nature, and I think all of us are just looking for ways in our own lives to give back and bring people in that can help share, messages that maybe many people don't get to hear. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing yours today.
Now,
Now,
the
Eric,
older I get, the more I want to share. So
no doubt. Now, Eric, there's a lot of people that know who you are, but there's probably quite a few that are listening today that might not have yet gotten to meet you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your backstory on how you got into the wild world of MSP?
So it really started, a long time ago, because I'm not lying. I'm not a young chicken anymore. I started doing consulting for friends, neighbors, friends of friends, small businesses when I was 15 years old. And my mom actually had to drive me to my first appointments, right? So started way back then, ended up because I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I mean, if it were left up to me, I would have been working at a Radio Shack for the rest of my life. But I went to the University of Central Florida, got a degree in computer engineering that I never used, but I learned a lot about troubleshooting, solving problems, I guess I would say, with the engineering degree.
Yeah.
And worked for a retail computer store in college, started my own consulting business, I guess we would call it back then, and did website design, the whole 9 yards. And then kind of took a detour after 10 years of doing that and was the chief operating officer of a fashion jewelry company, and then the CIO of a furniture manufacturing company that included billiard tables, which was kind of a lot of fun.
So the corporate track.
Yes. Although they were still small businesses, as
Yep.
they were the size that would typically still be served by an MSP, I would probably say. But at the end of that, I had an ex-client from when I was a consultant before that said, "Hey, we're splitting off from this other company. We really want you to come back and do our IT. And by the way, we'll pay you a salary, we'll give you benefits and an office next door that you can use to start another business if you want to." I said, "Heck yeah." Who turns that down?
No doubt. That's a great deal.
And so I did that. We did that for 7 years and ended up just got to the point where I was doing a lot of stuff kind of on the vendor side in terms of presentations and going to shows on behalf of the vendor, and really liked that. And so the opportunity came up to sell the MSP, switch to the vendor side. And that's where I've been for the past, it'll be 11 years this year.
Let's talk a little bit about where you are today there. No harm in sharing a little bit about what you do there and trying to drum up a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So I am the director of partner engagement at Ignite. That's my day job and love it. If you haven't looked at Ignite, the perfect solution for replacing a file server and going to the cloud with those file server type services. Lots of security and stuff you can build around it, but it can just also be a simple map drive letter to their files. The end users have no clue they're using something in the cloud and not an on-premise file server. So great solution for that. Love talking about that all the time. But then, of course, I also do this All Things MSP thing that I've been doing for, I think it's about 7 years now, and started as a Facebook group. Huh?
It's amazing it's been that long. Time flies.
Well, it started out as something very simple, right? It was something where I was I had changed my role at SolarWinds a little bit, and I was looking for kind of another outlet to share my experiences, the experiences that I was shared with others, because I was talking to a lot of people in the space back then. And so it gave me that outlet for sharing some of that information to hopefully give back as much as, this community has given me. And then it just kind of started growing and growing and growing to the point where in the last 2 or 3 years, we've started the YouTube channel and the podcast and a lot of different things. And it's been so much fun. And we've got, a decent following at this point. There's, I think, 5,600 people in the Facebook group, maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, good size
And
group.
we're closing in on about 2,000 subscribers on YouTube. So yeah, I couldn't be more pleased with it. And I have so much fun with it. That's the major point.
That's awesome. And the fun's got to be a big part of it, right? I think we're all doing this. I mean, we're adding one more task to our days, right? So in doing this, there's got to be a passion behind it. And certainly as somebody that's a member of All Things MSP, you see the conversation that goes on in the community. You see how people are helping one another there. And it's great to have, somebody at the helm of that type of forum, kind of guiding the conversation, but more importantly, giving a place for people to feel like they're included.
Yeah, because one of the things that's a little bit different about All Things MSP, and it's kind of the way I started it, so it's just kept that kind of culture, is that number one, we are mostly about the non-technical side of things. We're in a technical business. You'll never be able to separate it completely, but it's more about the business, the productivity, the HR type topics that might come up. And then for whatever reason, we've been able to minimize the drama in the group, which has been really great. And I'm so appreciative of the members, the vendors, everybody in the group who just keeps it civil.
Yep. And that's a big part of it, right? We've seen in some of the Facebook groups out there, unfortunately, things can turn a little dark at times. And, if you can live without that drama and really just be a helpful community, it's huge. I think people know how to share their opinions in your group in a way that it's inclusionary as opposed to maybe trying to single out people in
Right.
some ways, right? So good stuff. And for those that are watching the video today, we do have the link up here to All Things MSP. It's atmsp.link/Facebook for those listening on podcast. And as always, we'll pop that into our show notes as well as Eric's Facebook link so you can get in touch with him as well that way. But, at this point, maybe let's segue a little bit into something you and I were talking about before the call and something you're really passionate about. And it's something a lot of our listeners struggle with, especially, really the community at large struggles with, that work-life balance piece. How do we keep home life and work life separate, but more importantly, be giving adequate space for both, right? So I'd love to get your take on, a tactic you take to keep that work life balance going.
So there's so much to this, right? And the first thing I will say is that thinking of it as a balance is probably not the best thing because it's not a 1-for-1, right?
Yeah.
It's appropriate amount of time and appropriate amount of time. Work is going to probably take more time than your personal life, but you need to make sure that when it's personal and you don't let the work creep in. But in terms of a tactic, I think that time blocking is the most important thing that you can do. I mean, simply using a calendar, and it sounds stupid simple, right? But actually making sure that you are calendaring everything, right? I'm running 3 different calendars. I have a personal calendar, I have my Ignite calendar, and I have my All Things MSP calendar. But I also bring them all into one calendar. I use Fantastical. I'm not promoting it, but I do like it. And it brings all of those Google calendars in so that I can see everything on one calendar. And in addition to just knowing that you have time blocked out for these things, doing it proactively allows you to make sure that you are also, from a work standpoint, putting in the strategic blocks of time to work on your business rather than just in your business. Because we all know that's a big problem with small businesses of any type, MSP or regardless. And one of the things that I read just recently in I think it's called the 12-week year. It's called the 12-week year. And if you schedule that 3 hours at the beginning of your week to work on your business, the amount of power that has to improving your business is just huge.
And, and I can appreciate that as somebody that does struggle with the concept of time blocking, right? Like it's very easy to move things in your schedule. It's very easy to readapt to the way the day comes and hits you, right? But it is, I can understand that getting that strategic piece in. And you always hear owners talk about, I got to be working on my business, not in my business. But we all struggle with actually making that happen. I'm familiar with time blocking. I would love to say I do it well. I'm getting better at putting those strategic things in. Making sure there's time to plan both the big picture, plan the marketing routine. The things that we need to do in order to continue to scale and grow. But I'm bad at blocking outside my calendar for the personal things, and that's where the things run together. So I'd love to hear a little bit more.
Yeah. So I literally schedule everything, like including dinner, like because we sit down as a family still and have dinner. I have adult children still at home. And so we still schedule that time. And even down to one of the things I want to mention, by the way, in terms of the time blocking is there are three types. And I mentioned one that are important. Everybody schedules their meetings. Sometimes they even schedule some focus work to get specific things done. But the pieces that typically we miss are number one, that strategy piece. But second of all, it's buffer time. And buffer time is the time that you set aside to deal with those things that come up every day. And then you have breakout time, which are longer pieces of time that you use for personal stuff. It's for the recharging stuff. And that's where you really just need to intentionally schedule that time for those personal things to make sure that, oh, I'm supposed to just be doing personal stuff right now.
Yep. And one of the things that I think all of us, especially those that work remotely now, know is you can time shift things and bring some of that personal into our work calendar where we need to and where it's appropriate to get some things done. And I think overall you're seeing more people doing that. But I think that structure on when the day should end, when work should be put away, that's the things that I see people struggle with and hear oftentimes, ruling their lives. And I'm a chief offender. So
So every day on my calendar has a 30-minute block called workday startup. Well, except for Mondays. Mondays actually includes a 1-hour block called week startup.
yeah.
And then I have my weekday startup is a half an hour each day. And then I have a workday shutdown, which is a 30-minute block at the end of the day.
So maybe you expand a little bit more and talk a little bit about what those blocks do for you and what you're executing during those times.
So during those times, I have very specific, I actually have lists on index cards of the things that I do during that time so that I don't forget. And a lot of it is around just going through my to-do list, making sure that the to-do list is prioritized for the day and that I have everything blocked out. Because one of the other things about time blocking is that it shows you whether or not you have the time resources in the day to actually accomplish the tasks that you want to get done. And if you don't, you know that you need to push something off to the future. And so doing that, it's calendar management, it's the time blocking, it is the inbox to zero. Okay. Inbox to zero happens in the morning, happens at night. Sometimes if I can get away with it during the day, but it always happens at the beginning of the day and then at the end of the day. And one of the things that is so important at the end of the day is to make sure I've captured all of the tasks that I'm trying to make sure that are captured and that they are put somewhere to wherever the next time I'm going to need them is.
So that's where you might be creating these tasks is coming right out of that mode of looking at those emails at the end of the day. And certainly that's something I agree with too. I try to do the 2 times a day email, but I think again, we're all guilty with all these devices that we have of seeing some of those things in the middle of the day and all of a sudden getting reactionary again, right? Well, that's something I need to take care of now.
And they happen, right?
Yeah.
That's what the buffer time in the middle of the day is for.
Perfect. So you've done time blocking. It sounds like you've got a very rigid kind of approach to it. Probably something you could teach. That's my 2 cents because everybody does struggle with this and really give some good insight. What are some of the gains you've seen since you've started doing this?
Oh, just the productivity gains, the ability to get through 90% of my tasks for the day versus just haphazardly going to the day and maybe getting half of them done, it's a huge difference in terms of productivity. And I notice it the most really when I fall off the wagon, because I would love to sit here and tell you that I do this religiously every day. That's just not practical. But there have been times when I've fallen off the wagon for a week or more, and it really has affected my productivity.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a listener out there that would think that you're doing it religiously every day, because we just work in a world that unfortunately sometimes force us to be reactionary, right?
Right.
Especially on the MSP side of things, where all it takes is one phone call to really change the complexion of the day. We don't have that struggle as much on the vendor side, but it's there. There are still
Yes.
days like that. They just tend to be a little less frequent, right? But kudos, man. I mean, just trying to take control is definitely a big part of it. And I'm sure the family is very happy on the other side of the equation. I made some changes that have definitely, pivoted that. And my family tells me I'm a lot easier to deal with now. So
Yep, for sure.
it's a big part of it.
Because it does reduce stress by a lot as well.
Yeah. And that stress is shared, right? In any family, we feel the stress of the others around us and they feel it right back from us as well. So, if you're not winding your day down and getting control of it, you can come out of the day. At least I know I found for myself sometimes a little agitated, and that agitation would be
Yeah.
shared with others. All right. So, I think we've covered off, unless you have anything else that you'd like to talk about work-life balance. And let's get into our next topic you and I were talking about, because this is a fun one as well.
Okay. So AI, I mean, everybody's talking about it, but I did a poll in my Facebook group recently where I asked them, how much do you think your clients, or how many of your clients do you think are using AI, specifically generative AI, in their business? And it's very interesting because less than 10% of the MSPs in the group came back and said that their clients were using it significantly in their business. And so I went out and started looking for more data because, I'm a data kind of guy. And I found an article in Forbes that said that 77% of small to medium sized businesses are already using generative AI in, to do something in their business. And that's a huge disparity, right? And it's a disparity that has implications because there are best practices and security issues that are present in the use of AI. And so the opportunity that I see for MSPs in this space is the ability to go in at first to do project work, to build an acceptable use policy. And I actually posted an example of that so that people can download it for free, as well as a checklist and kind of a little training guide as well. So not necessarily all the things that they need to train like specifically, but just an outline of what a training program might look like in terms of best practices for AI. And then, of course, there's the consistent monitoring and training of the best uses for AI as we kind of morph some MSPs, at least, into more of this consulting role, kind of this chief technology officer role, where you're actually teaching them how to leverage new technologies to gain efficiencies, to gain productivity, to gain revenue and profit in their business. So a lot of different opportunities here, but it's a big one. And one of the things that I think is kind of disturbing the picture a little bit is a lot of people are saying that there's a lot of hype around AI and a lot of vendors adding AI to their product stacks, which I think is true. By the way, I think Tom Lawrence had a great conversation on LinkedIn about this a couple of weeks ago. And while that hype is true, it's hype, and there's probably a bubble there, as Tom put it in his article, I also think that AI is not leaving. Like, this is something that is going to be here to stay, and it's something that MSPs need to address. And I think it's an opportunity to add to the services.
And I agree with so much of that because, let's start with the vendor piece of that conversation. I think a lot of folks just started jamming AI into their applications because it was becoming one of those things. If we don't have it, we're going to fall behind. But I think as that concept matures, Now these vendors are looking and going, really, where are we bringing value through the AI? And is there value being extracted from the customer and really trying to work on it? So, whether there's a bubble perceptionally or not, I think it's going to just be a maturation process, almost the same way cloud was, right? Almost the same way other things that we've gone through. Now, what I'm diving into and what we're certainly having a lot of conversations around is the security of using AI. And I put it almost to the wild, wild west of, and I just mentioned cloud, of when SaaS applications really came back into focus. And you had groups like your marketing teams testing all kinds of softwares, using it and putting personal data up into the web, not even thinking about it, with IT having no awareness of how it was being used, where it really was, and how many of those systems were being abandoned because they were really just test farms, right?
Yep.
And I'm picking on marketing, but you and I do marketing. We have software loves, right? We love to try new things and experiment. And that was an area that we were seeing a lot of potential data leakage. Now you look at AI, and I think as the industry and the end users are learning how to use it and where it's really valuable, that's where some concerns come into play.
Yeah.
I look at how AI is introduced to my life, right? If you're a Grammarly user, which God forbid I wasn't, you've got AI sitting right in front of your face. Whether or not you're using it or not, it's there, and it's ready for you. And I think that's what's contributing to that true 77% number. People are finding ways to use the generative AI side or being directed to ways to use it. And we're not accounting for it as an MSP community because we're not
Yeah.
directly delivering it.
I think you're right. I'll even take your analogy a little bit farther and say that AI is a lot like rogue IT was in COVID, right? People needed to use it, so they started using it. MSPs were not necessarily aware that they were using it, and it had security implications, right? But then there's also this other element where it is a lot like cloud because it's an adoptive technology that's evolving, right? But I think the difference is with cloud, there was a lot of hesitation on the part of the end users to adopt it, officially in the business. Whereas I think the adoption is much faster because people are just starting to use it because there's a lower barrier to entry, number one. Plus it's cooler, number two, and it's free.
Yeah, I think I saw an article in the Harvard Business Review that really spoke to that. Like, there's been no technology that has come out that has been adopted at the pace of AI, and that's inclusive of social media, right? That took while it became hot, and new social media outlets might grab some quick traction. The reality is, when you think of when Facebook first came out, people were skeptical for a while, right? It took some time for some growth there, but AI has definitely been adopted and adopted quickly by all of us in some fashion.
Yeah. And I think as MSPs, there's a responsibility to go to your clients and say, AI, it's great. It's a great tool, but here's how you need to leverage it. And by the way, we need to put some guardrails around your employees to make sure they're using it properly and securely.
And those AI policies are becoming real, and you're even seeing the frameworks now starting to bring in, from a governance and compliance standpoint, AI benchmark. CIS has, or no, excuse me, NIST has an AI benchmark right now. We're starting to see some of the others starting to look at that as well, and it's critical, right? I mean, it's an education thing. You need people to understand how to use it, what's appropriate, what's not, especially in your if you're incorporating it into your deliverables that you might be giving to meaning your customers end users are giving to their end users, right? So there's a lot to take into consideration in this process. But I think the other part is you're starting to see the mind shift at the ownership level. Generative AI is the big thing that everybody's talking about, but now people are looking and saying, yeah, but how can we train that and bring it into business process? And what are the gains and efficiencies we can get there that are beyond, I mean, I think marketing is probably the biggest area where it's being utilized today, right? But, get past that, there's a lot of great stuff going on. I mean, we're seeing it in our own industry with guys like, Thread and MSP bots and other
Yep.
folks like that, building it into their automation stack.
Absolutely. And I just think it's going to grow more and more, and it's going to be more and more part of our everyday world. I mean,
Yeah.
it's marketing because it's creative and you know, there's a lot to be done there in terms of generating content. But also we had Adam Angst from Tidbits on the podcast not that long ago, and he said AI is a C plus student at best.
Yep.
And so you can't just rely on it. You still have to have the expertise, but there's so much more that it can do. And, I just look forward to what MSPs are going to be able to help their clients with in
Yeah.
terms of AI.
And I mean, I'm glad you said that too, because that's the biggest thing in AI is you got to take it at face value. If you're not going in there proofing it, assuming, kind of doing some of your R&D behind, or I shouldn't say R, but research behind it to really make sure that the facts are true, it is a C plus student. I think that's a great analogy that he had, because there are things you got to tweak, and some people haven't really adopted that part of it yet. Like, this
Right.
isn't something you should just be turning around.
But you can take a C plus student and generate a lot of great stuff that then you can start building on, right?
Yep.
It's almost like, because you're never going to have all A plus employees, right? You're going to have some C plus employees. So it's just like having a C plus employee. You just need to learn how to work within what they give you so that you can then take that and make it what it needs to be before you
Right.
put it in front of clients or whatever it is.
Awesome. Well, we're getting near the end of our time, Eric. I'd love to go into if you have any other closing thoughts around AI or anything else that you want to share with the community before we wrap up today.
Well, I just want to say thank you for, having me on today. I really do appreciate it. I love what you guys do, and just, I'm here to help anybody. I love just sharing with the community. And if anybody wants to join the Facebook group, again, just head on over to atmsp.link/Facebook, or find us on YouTube. We're there as well. And just love
Yeah, and I
being a part of
definitely
this.
and I definitely encourage everybody, if you're not part of the Facebook group, jump in, because as Eric indicated, it's one of the more friendlier and helpful groups that's out in the marketplace. There's great information and great guests coming in from Eric's side, and really appreciate folks like him that are trying to foster and build those communities as well, because it's tough. Everybody's at a different part of their arc, right? And that's what you see sometimes in these communities, people kind of ridiculing those that might just be on the front end of their journey. How do you not know that kind of thing? I see often, but the reality is, where do you get this information? How do you
Yeah.
get better? You need these communities like you've built here to be able to share freely where you're stuck, and hopefully get responses back that help you grow. We all had mentors when we were young. We didn't all step into this like geniuses, right? So, my 2 cents, and hopefully I'm being an advocate for your group here in the sense of just be kind when you're in there. Understand everybody's on a different step in their path. The two guys in front of you today have gray hair. We've been around for a while, but there's people that are just jumping into it this morning, and I will tell you, it's much more complex than when Eric and I jumped into it. So
Way
there's
more.
a lot more to know. My favorite line is, every day I get stupider because I learned something else I didn't know. And it just continues to tell me how much there is out there in technology that's really, no one person
Yeah.
can contain it all. So
That is
that's my
truly one of the ways that this industry has evolved, is because back then it was easy, right? We were taking care of computers, we were designing websites. That was about it.
yeah
Now
we
you've
had
got all this security, compliance, governance, AI. There's so much more to deal with.
Yeah, and again, everybody's more mature too, right? When you and I first started in the industry, we were talking to people that had to understand what these systems can do. But now those managers are digital natives, people that have had these tools at their fingertip for the majority, if not all of their lives. So they're asking a different set of questions even than the people that we dealt with before.
Yeah.
So, I go back to be kind to all, because we need to rise the tides, or raise the tides, right? And
Yeah.
and support those that are in their walk and in their journey. And I love what you guys do there, because there is very little drama in your group. I do notice that.
Well, thanks.
Awesome. Well, Eric, again, thank you so much for being a guest today. Listeners, you can get this anywhere you can download your podcast, as well as our YouTube. Just go to @MSP Business School, and you'll be able to get those there. In our show notes, we'll be including the links to Eric's Facebook group, his LinkedIn profile. So get in touch with him. Any other ways that people can get in touch with you, Eric, that you want to share, or anything that's going on in the group that you want to highlight before we say goodbye?
Really, LinkedIn is probably the best way to find me and get a hold of me. Just message me there. That's usually where I'm most responsive. Join the Facebook group. Let me know that, you heard from us here on the podcast so that we know where you're coming from. And other than that, if YouTube is more your thing, find us there. And we do have a page. We actually have a page on LinkedIn as well. So if you're not that into Facebook, most of what is in the Facebook group is also published to the LinkedIn page as well.
Awesome. So, listeners, ton of ways you can get in touch with Eric and go see his content. I encourage you to do so. Eric, thank you so much for joining me today. And I look forward to seeing you out there on the show circuit.
Thank you. I'll see you in a couple weeks.
All right.